cold salt slams across the deck. Oars snap like ribs. A mast groans, tilts, and shears away into the black. Men scream, ropes bite skin, iron rings on mail in the dark. Lightning opens the night and closes it again. The king is on his knees, breath white, a bright circle burning cold in his left hand. He slips. The water swallows. A final golden blink turns green, then gone. If stories like this carry you away, help us reach others who love Middle-earth. Tap like, subscribe for more what ifs, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from tonight. We would love to read your trail on the map. Waves thunder onto a stony shore where no song will ever be sung. Gulls wheel and cry over wreckwood and bodies. The morning after the storm smells of wet rope and shredded sail. In the bones of the ship tangled on the reef, a men of Númenórean blood hang silent as kelp. There is no crown, there is no banner. There is a single black sea chest jammed under a fallen spar, and within it, wrapped in oilcloth, the shards of a sword the sea could not eat. A fisher of Lebanon, face windburned and eyes reddened from sleeplessness, unknots the wrappings and finds the pale gleam of a broken blade laid carefully by a hand that will not touch it again. Word goes first to Pelagia, then up the river to Osgiliath and Minas Anor, then into the white halls where Meneldil waits on cold stone, and finally by messenger riders along the great road toward the northern wild, where a boy in Rivendell grows up under the eye of Elrond. There is grief. There is a division that was always there. There is the slow closing of a hand around a scepter in the south, and the passing of a weight in the north to a child whose father never came home. The sea knows and does not speak. In the green twilight, 20 fathoms down, a ring of fire sleeps like a seed in silt. Cold currents turn it. Once, a small fish nips at the pale gleam and swims away as if burned. The light around it, if there is light, is not of sun. Songs are sung on the shore of Linden in a tongue that the waves remember. And in the night, Círdan the shipwright stands with his hands deep in his sleeves and listens to the long harp note of the surf. He knows before the messenger arrives. He looks south, past long leagues of broken cloud, to a place no man can see through the white rage of the storm that swallowed the king of Gondor. When Elrond comes down later that year to the Grey Havens, their words are low and spare. It is lost. Círdan says, and the beard that has been salt silver since the first rising of the moon is wet with spray. Not in river, not in reed. It fell into the elder salt. Elrond looks out over the winter sea and says nothing for a while. When he speaks, his words are cautious, as if the water itself listens. If it is lost in the outer deeps, then there is a mercy even in this bitter turn. The hand that forged it will not find it. Círdan does not answer. Through wind-borne foam, he hears another sound, the far thunder that men make when they die. The memory of Númenor is loud tonight. In the dark lands east of the Efelduath, a shadow that is not a shadow stirs. There are no eyes to narrow, and yet there is a narrowing of will, a recoil, a tilt. A thin strand of thought goes west and west again and breaks upon an edge it cannot see. He cannot go into the sea. He cannot send his hand there. He cannot call it to rise. But he can move the world that stands at the sea's rim. South of the Anduin's mouths, old enemies of Gondor feel fire under their feet. Sailmakers in Umbar cut a black cloth and stitch in red thread the winged serpent upon it. And men, smelling pitch and wine and the tarry musk of rope, listen to a new captain speak. He is young and broad-shouldered, a throwback to a memory in his bones. He says that the sea owes them a debt. He says he will take back from Gondor the water and the wind. He says he has dreamed of a golden coin under the waves. Zimriel, they call him, which is a name that remembers something before it. He drinks from a cup carved out of a whale's tooth and throws it against a pillar so hard it explodes. When the storms roll up the coast that winter, the huts in Belfalas lose their doors. Children run barefoot in the wash when the sky lightens, hunting driftwood that does not always turn out to be wood. One boy in Dol Amroth sees a ring of light under a wreath of foam, reaches with both hands and gasps when it is gone. He tells his mother that something laughed under the water. Polities pick themselves around a hole. Meneldil is crowned king of Gondor under white veils of rain that do not frankincense the air but sour it. He holds the shards of a sword and turns them point to the floor. He does not say the name of the one who bore them last. In the north, Elrond sets a hand on Valandil's shoulder and tells him about the sea in the careful way of the firstborn. That mixture of truth and river water that leaves men both calmer and more uneasy than before. What is kept by the sea remains the sea's, Elrond says. Do not ask it to give back what it has taken. Will it never return anything? The boy asks, big-eyed, wrapped in wool. Sometimes, Elrond says, and doesn't say what, and does not say when. In winter, Palantiri show clearer things to those who know how to look. He will keep the northern stone far from any shore. Questions run like mice under the floorboards of this new world. Did the sea take the ring for pity, or out of the same hunger that drowned the island of the kings? Would Ulmo, if he were to rise, be friend to the works of hand and horse? Or is he the old wild only, and all our naming of him is smoke blown off a wave? In the 2nd century of the Third Age, long after the cracked hull of Isildur's ship has been harvested down to the last iron nail, a fisherman from Linhir puts out before dawn and smells something raw and sweet, like a lily rotting. The water around his skiff is green-black and slick. He hauls in a net that tears. He brings home almost nothing but a single silver fish with a round hole in its lip, as if a small god pinched it. That night, he dreams that he is walking on the bottom of the bay, and the sand slopes always away from him, and beneath it something bright moves when it thinks he is not watching. The Witch King gathers himself like a storm over the north. The slow war begins there all the same. While Gondor and Umbar squint at one another across the shining band of the Bay of Belfalas and across the long river, something blacker than a corsair sail falls over the kingdoms of the Dunedain in Arnor. In Fornost, they look west to the sea. Less often, they look east to the line of hills no horse will cross at night. It is still the same game board, shifted. The sea that swallowed a ring cannot keep a mountain that nurses a king of knives from walking. Círdan sends help without waiting to be asked. The men of the ships fold their weather-stiff hands over sword hilts and ride inland, their eyes squinting out of habit in a wind that does not touch them on the cheek. This is not their element, but they will not let the north fall alone. Will he become weaker now that his trinket is drowned? A captain asks in a low voice as they cross the Brandywine on a fog morning, and a mallard stares at them with the indignation of a free thing interrupted. No, I says the elf who rides beside him without saddle or rein. He will become more careful. That is worse. In Umbar, Zimriel grows into his dream. He charts the shoals at the Anduin's mouths on the backs of old deeds stolen from a Gondorian magistrate. He takes the sweetest wives from among the merchant houses and chills the room with a look when they protest. In the long room with the green tiles where beer is poured from jars and roasted fish is split and piled, he taps the tabletop with a dagger and asks each man what he would give to own the sea. When one laughs, Zimriel says nothing, and later that man is found floating face down in the harbour with his mouth full of pearls. Over 2 generations, the little cove where Isildur died is swallowed again by storms and spit up again. Each year the sand tastes different. Each year another gull learns the smell of old wine. The square block of stone that men called the King's Foot because it stuck out like a boot in the shallows is undermined until one winter it rolls and sinks. Children stop playing on it. The stories change around empty air. In the havens, the keels of ships being built sound like the beating of a big heart. The elves tune their voices to the sea lute and sing old laments, and the sound carries up to the parapets where men of the Edain stand on guard and do not understand a word and are comforted by it anyway. Sometimes when Elrond comes down, he and Círdan stand with Galadriel and talk like a cliff talks carefully. She has watched a sea lift and drown a place once. She does not forgive the water, and yet she keeps a lock of it in her cup because to refuse it would be to cut her throat. It is not pity, she says. Do not call it pity. It is a wall, Círdan says quietly. A wall you do not see until you strike it. Then let him break his head, Galadriel says, and her eyes are very far away. In a forest east of Anduin, shadow grows fingers. The one who cannot go into the deep salt reaches outward into wet places that are not sea. He learns to wrap himself in smoke. He learns the smell of fear that comes when men wake and cannot find the edges of their own hands. He is a patient hunter, and he has time. The Shire is born anyway, not because of a loss, but because of a need as plain as bread. In the year the pipeweed harvest is ruined by rain, the Tyne writes a letter in a hand like a plough lane to the king of Arthedain. And the king answers with a mark of his seal that is light on wax, because his heart is old already. Hobbits move west with their pots and their songs, stepping over stones, carrying their mothers' kettles and a patience that no storm can blow away. They smell the distant salt and do not go nearer. They build low and deep and laugh in winter in rooms where ceiling beams sweat. They hear stories. They always do. A tinker passing through Buckland says that the sea took a ring that was not meant to sink. Children roll coins across their knuckles and try to make them drop and vanish. Their mothers slap them lightly and say the sea keeps what it eats. Some men cannot stand a story unfinished. In Gondor, in the 3rd century, a steward named Igalmoth takes up the hunt. He says he is making a census of lost things. He sends out small boats and big ones. He pays well, and men drown for the weight of his coin. Wives light small blue lamps and hang them in windows to look like stars so that ships might turn toward home. When Igalmoth dies in his bed with dulled eyes, staring toward a window that shows no water, his son throws his father's papers into a chest and closes the lid with a look that is not contempt so much as exhaustion. The War of the North crawls toward its black center. The Witch King wears the snowmen of Forochel like a cloak and drags it across the faces of men who breathe fog and swing swords whose edges go dull in an hour. The last king of Arthedain clasps fingers with Círdan and goes aboard a ship in weather that should be safe. It is not, or perhaps the sea remembered too much and pays back a debt to a different name. The blue water eats the keel, the oars, the rope, the breath in the mouths of men. The palantiri that sit wrapped in wool at the bottom of the hold go down into the glass place that is beneath all water and do not return. On the beach the next morning, a boy finds a plank with a nail in it and carries it home as if it were a sword. Not again, someone says in Mithlond when the news comes. Círdan tightens his lips. He buries a part of himself with the King of the North there in the ice where no gull calls. He writes a letter that says very little and sends it to a lady under the trees of Imladris, whose mouth is set but whose eyes cry when she is alone. Through all this, the thing under the waves turns over once, twice, in centuries. It does not sleep. Its thought is a thin line of hunger, a call sent always and always across a distance its maker cannot swim. It touches nothing, and nothing touches it. But the world that moves above it slowly aligns, drawn by tides that have always been, and by a will that has learned patience. When the Astari come, they taste salt upon the wind. Mithrandir touches the sand with the toe of his grey boot and looks down a long time. If there were a voice in the ground, he might say it to himself. He might call this one, what? Friend? Teacher? He does not know. Olorin remembers standing beside a greater sea in a place where the sky was so clean that he felt like someone had washed his eyes. He turns and goes inland, because that is what he was sent to do. Saruman, whose name in the west is Kurunir, comes to the havens with a little smile and an earnestness that convinces even when it should not. He asks many questions. How many currents run at the mouth of the Anduin? Where do they go when they go? Does any road run under the gulf in old maps? He reads long in the archive of charts that Círdan keeps, and he runs a finger along the lines with something like love. His hands smell of fibre and glue and a sharper smell like metal. He says, again and again, that knowledge is a net. What slips one weave will catch in another. It will not, Círdan says to Galadriel afterward, voice so low that even elves strain to hear it. Not if it does not wish to be caught. But he believes in snares more than he believes in songs, she says. It will pull him down. In the south, the corsairs draw tight. Haradrim princes send sons to sea to learn how to climb rope and kill a man on a wet deck. Gondor answers with ship and spear. And the long war of the bay begins in earnest. It has a rhythm like breath. In spring, they raid. In summer, fishermen do not go out beyond sight of the white tower of Dol Amroth. In autumn, sails go grey with mildew. In winter, men die of fever. In lower decks never meant for the living in storm time. The smell is of salt, tar, oranges gone bad, and rust. The shouts carry shoreward and echo off the towers of the princes of Belfalas, where banners snap in the wind and gulls steal bread from widows' hands. Twice, the corsairs try the keys of Pelagir. Once they are driven off by a wind that comes straight down the river, steady as an arm for 2 days. Some call that chance, some do not. Once they drive the defenders into the water and stand on the very stones of the harbour with torches lifted and a red light like sunset in their faces. Their captain then, a tall brown man with a pearl in his ear, shouts that the sea is theirs and that the king under the sand will rise. He laughs like someone who knows he is watched. He does not know who watches. Far east, Dol Guldur makes trees sweat and men lose their way in noon. A rumor goes among the Dark Ones that a new plan moves. Why look north to rivers and slow rocks when the real road is south under the night wind? He reaches with more than thought this time. He looks for a weakness at the water's edge. At the White Council, seated at a distance around a table where the grain of the wood twists like the stubbornness of an oak, voices rise and fall. "We cannot fight the sea," says a prince of Dol Amroth who has scars from ankle to throat that the salt will not let heal. "We can fight men who sail on it, take the harbours, and break their oars. We will not be the first to bring fire to a harbour," Galadriel says coolly. "Must men always answer loss with burning? The sea has taken. It may keep. It will not keep forever," Saruman says, and his hands are already folding by reflex, as though around a pipe that he has not yet stolen the idea for. It never does. Everything comes back in time. We should be ready when it does. Mithrandir looks at him, long and level. "Are you building nets for fish or for kings?" he asks. "For truth," Saruman says, and smiles because that is safe. The first great turning comes on a spring night, when the stars are greasy with cloud and the tide in the Anduin is low. Zimriel of Umbar, who has made himself a scourge, sacks the docks of Harland with the noise of 1,000 drums. He stands in a longboat with a red-painted prow. He can smell the gardens of Minas Anor when the wind shifts. He thinks, in a glass thickness of certainty that feels like a dream, that he is near to something older than his own bones. But the horns of Rohan sound from the fields of Lossarnach. The riders come down out of the dark with wet black tails and eyes bloodshot and bridles screaming. They hit like a wall. Half the corsairs die in the instant their boats touch mud. Zimriel takes an arrow in the face that breaks his jaw and is dragged away by 2 men with wet ropes around their wrists. Later, he sits on a cushion and drinks wine through a bent tube because he cannot close his mouth, and outside his tent, the cries of dying men go on and on. He looks east and tries to think of a golden thing underwater. He dreams that night that he is walking in a city that once could not drown, and the streets are full of fish. Círdan sends his men home to their wives with the quiet satisfaction of work well done. The steward of Gondor calls the victory a proof that men can master men at least. The council is relieved without being reassured. In the long years that follow, small losses pile like stones. A steward named Belecthor sits up late night after night, bent over a palantir that shows him only a very old grief. His hair goes white, and he begins to call his granddaughter by the name of his dead mother. He thinks he sees a ring of brilliance under green light and orders out a fleet in winter. It goes and does not return. In Linhir, women sleep with their men's boots in their beds, as if the weight of the leather might balance the empty weight of the sea. In Minas Anor, men begin to be able to smell rain 3 days out, the way their grandfathers smelled fire from a forest a day away. Rohan rides more often. The drums of Umbar pound more slowly. Then, without warning, the second turning comes up out of a storm like a knife out of a sleeve. In the season when fruit trees swell and cattle stand in rivers to their bellies to cool, the sea bottom shifts. Stone that has not moved since the fall of the island cracks. In the Bay of Belfalas, a fault heaves. For 2 nights and a day the swell is wrong. Caves rise and spill, sand spits disappear, and water climbs steps to houses at a rate that looks like thought. The next morning dawns with a sky clear as a blade. On an isolated rock at the edge of Tolfalas, a young man with his shirt torn up the side wakes from a blackout and coughs salt. His name is Marachil of Dol Amroth, second captain, son of a carpenter. His right hand is closed so tightly that his nails have cut half-moons in his palm. He opens his hand. The thing in it is colder than the rock beneath him. It looks simple, and the morning is so clean that his mind slides off implications the way gulls do off wind. He turns it in his fingers, and it makes the flesh look old under the gold. He puts it on and vanishes. The shock hurls him backward into the rock. He strikes his head and goes down with his mouth open. Alone on a slick piece of the world, Marachil finds that he can see the ribs of his own hands. No, not see, feel. The bones lay themselves open in the air of a place that is not for men. He tears the thing off with a sob and screams without meaning to. In the blue of ordinary day, he is visible again. Far inland, a mind that has been as wide and as thin as a winter sky suddenly tightens to a point you could put through cloth. The Nazguls stir. They have been anger without target for a long time. Target makes anger clean. In Umbar, men wake to a sound like silk tearing, and 3 black shapes cut the sky and leave the taste of iron behind them. In the grey havens, Círdan looks up from a plank he is planing and lets the tool fall to the floor. Now, he says, to no one, and the word is as heavy as anything he has ever lifted. Marachil is good at being a captain. The ring makes him the best version of a thing he already is. His men love him for the way he looks at them, like they are seen they fear him, because his eyes go away sometimes as if into another room. He sequences his ships with an angle that makes other mariners frown in readiness, because they know there is something beyond skill now in the way he places hulls on water. He says he is tired. He says he hears music when there is none. He stops sleeping. When he thinks of the ring, his knees feel weak when he does not think of it. His hands feel empty like a lost child. He puts it on once, at night, alone in the stern while his helmsman looks forward and whistles thinly through his teeth. In the unseen, he senses the world in a new geometry. He sees the hunger of things, their longing to be near their own ruin. It breaks him open and embrittles him at once. He takes it off and vomits until there is nothing left. Word spreads faster than wind moves. A man of the princes, someone says in a fish market, has taken something the sea stole from a king. The rumor splits 3 ways as it travels, and each way finds a mouth to feed it. Zimriel hears, and he puts his ship out without waiting for tide. The steward hears, and his hand on the arm of his chair leaves dents. Saruman hears and goes very still and thinks about lines on paper and lines in water and lines in mines. Mithrandir hears and sits down without bothering to find a chair. He is in the Shire. Outside the round window, 2 children throw pebbles at one another and call names with laughter. He remembers a different child, long ago, and a different, bright, terrible thing. He knows this is not the same, and yet his hands smell of the same smoke when he rubs them together and looks at the shallow lines there. They must not let him keep it, and they must not let it go to the one who looks for it with teeth. What choices remain in a world with too much water between gates? Círdan goes to Dol Amroth and finds a prince with salt crystals on his lips and a face cut up with pain from nights without sleep. I cannot hold him, the prince says. He is my brother's wife's nephew by marriage and my friend since we were boys. But his eyes are wrong. He is strong, and he is broken. Do not name it to him, Círdan says, and bitter understanding rises like bile in his throat. To name it now is to give it a face it will like. I have seen it, the prince whispers. It is small as a thought. It has no mercy. I do not have to name it to know it will take my city from me. Then we must take it from him, Círdan says, and is ashamed of the relief that moves in him like a wave with the tide. Before the east does, Saruman comes to Pelagir wearing dignity like a cloak. He speaks to captains and stewards in a voice that makes even men who distrust him want to obey. He goes down to the wharf with a small retinue and looks at the water with its scummy edge and says out of the corner of his mouth to a man who has been paid to repeat his words in a tavern, he will do as he is told. The ring can only be held by one who understands its nature, and he is a boatman. Mithrandir finds Marichil in the anchor room of his own flagship, chalk in hand, handwriting a map of currents on the hull like a prayer. He looks old and young at once. When he lifts his head and sees the grey man, something in him abases and something in him bristles. I know who you are, Marichil says flatly. You have such eyes as a gull might have if it were a man. You have had your own losses. Do not come pity me. I am not drowning. Then do not put it on, Mithrandir says, as gentle as is wise when a man is already half in love with the thing that is slowly killing him. Marichil puts the chalk down on a barrelhead and rubs his wrist. If I give it to you, he says, what will you do? Where will you take it? How will you keep it from the mouth it is made for? I will put it in a fire that can eat anything, Mithrandir says simply. He does not say what that fire is, because he is not a fool, and the walls have ears. Marichil smiles like a man who thinks he is being lied to, and is relieved because the lie is better than the truth he suspects. You will be too slow, he says. They are already flying. On that note, like a cue, the Nazgul come. They hit the fleet on a windless night. Their wings make no sound on the air. But men crouch and pull their cloaks up over their heads anyway to mute a noise they cannot hear. Torches gutter. A trumpet's first note does not sound like a trumpet, but like a man trying to breathe with a hand over his mouth. The terrifying beauty of the unseen lays out behind the thin drape of the world of day. Marichil puts the ring on without thinking. He screams, and it is not entirely in a human voice. What battle looks like from the outside is splintered oars, blood and salt, fire running in little lines along spilled oil, men falling silent as they fall into water. What it looks like from the inside of the ring is geometry and hunger, and long lines like ropes thrown from far away tightening. Marichil feels the one who waits. It is like being loved by a storm. He takes the ring off with both hands. He holds it at the edge of the starboard rail. He means to drop it. He means to save himself. He means to save everyone. He cannot. Saruman's black ships slide in among the white ones in the murk, indistinguishable until a line of chain draws tight against a keel and a lamp shines, and a small, cold smile is seen at a rail. He has chosen. He could not help himself. He shouts something about strategy, about binding the hunter to the net, and his face is set as if he is waiting for a tide that will end with him beating the shore to death with his hands. A sudden wind rises. It comes up the river like a memory. Flags crack like whips in it. The black wings beat once and are forced down, and the riders curve up with a composure that is the opposite of panic and go away to circle and reconsider. A marachil stares down into the water and sees his own face the way it would look in a coffin. He puts the ring on, not for power, but out of the same reflex that makes a hand clutch when you think you are falling. He jumps. The water is not fire, and yet what happens to him has heat in it. He goes down and keeps going down. He sees a light that is not a light, far, far below, and he thinks for a moment that the water is air, and that he will meet someone he has always wanted to meet. There is a sound like cloth ripping. Above, men pull at ropes and shriek. Below, the sea rearranges itself around a small intention with indifferent grandeur. When it is done, there is no marachil. There is a ring, heavy as regret, turning over itself in long, slow arcs. There is a mind that howls thinly, like wind in a gap, and then stops howling and begins to listen with a patience that has learned a lesson about haste. The third turning looks like a miracle and bears the same price as miracles always do. A wall of water rises in the morning without warning offshore of the Bay of Belfalas. It is not a wave like other waves. It is tall without foam. It moves too fast. It takes men who have been at sea all their lives and makes them children. In Dol Amroth, they ring the alarm bells until the clappers come off in men's hands. The sea lays its long palm on the land and presses down. Boats are lifted and set on roofs. A horse screams. A child is pulled out from under a table by the hair and saved by a woman whose name no one bothers to learn because she dies anyway later that afternoon of a cut she did not notice. The flood goes up the Anduin. The delta changes its shape. Círdan stands on a seawall that will not do much good and weeps openly with no shame because he knows what this is and what it is not. It is not mercy. And yet, in the slack water that comes after, something small and terrible has been moved. The ring has been carried against the logic of the big world, over sandbanks and around rocks, and into a mouth that leads inland. In Reedwater, in the day that follows the flood, a soldier of Gondor takes a spear and pushes off from a little mud bank where reeds make a privacy around him. He is bone-tired. His name is Maneldur, which is a name with history in it that he does not think about. His wife thinks he is dead because she saw the sea pick up their house and put it down in their neighbor's field. He has mud in the cuffs of his trousers. He reaches to clear something caught on the spearhead and brings up a clump of riverweed with a shine in it. He curses because he has cut himself on something sharp. He sees then that it is not glass. He wipes it on his shirt. It looks ridiculous. He puts it on with the air of someone who has had a long week and deserves a good turn. He vanishes. He does not scream. He does not take it off. He crouches in the mud with his eyes rolled up into his head and breathes so softly that the flies that have wanted him all morning go away in disgust. Then very slowly, he stands. He bends and sets the spear across his shoulders and sets off upriver like a man who knows where he is going. "We must find him," Mithrandir says when the report reaches him, and there is no one in the room then who can do anything but obey. "How?" the steward asks, and his voice is small in the big hall. "This is not a hunt with hounds and horns," Círdan says. "This is an act of mercy, done on a battlefield full of people who do not know they are dying yet. A company gathers. It is small because the right ones are few. Mithrandir goes, and Círdan goes, and a prince of Dol Amroth who does not think he deserves to live when his men drowned yesterday, goes. and an elf of Mirkwood whose bowstring has been quiet too long goes, and a woman from Linhir whose husband left with the flood and did not come back. Goes because she can read the river's mind in her open palm, and the oldest hobbit anyone can remember ever seeing, who came down to trade barley for a pig and stayed to stare at the sea that day, goes because he listens like a stone listens. She says her name is Harith. She does not make a noise riding. When she thinks a thing, she says it in as few words as possible. The elf watches her hands and thinks of the fingers of Ulmo on a harp. The prince gives her his cloak, and she does not say a thank you, because gratitude is a luxury of peace. They are not alone. The Nazgul do not need to smell blood to come. They smell something sweeter. The poor pieces of men that are not yet entirely gone to shadow fly their terrible animals over the marshes and spook geese up out of reeds with a rush like 1,000 dresses. Meneldur goes north into places where men avoid their own reflections for older reasons. He falls in with a band of deserters without a word, and leaves them without a word when he finds a better path through a stand of dead willows that looks like a gate made by hunger. He lies with his face in mud and lets frogs climb his back. His mind is full of an idea so clean that nothing sticks to it. He must go where the thing in his hand is pulling. He is not bitter. He is not happy. He is not anything. In the poplars at dusk in a field near the Nindalf, Harith cuts horsehair to tie her hair into a tail and tells Mithrandir without looking at him, he is going to the mountain. Yes, he says, he is. You will let him. I will go with him, he says, and it sounds like something that hurts. Do not pity him, she says, and he looks at her, startled, because these are Galadriel's words, in a voice with mud in it. I do not, he says. I pity the thing that thinks it will own him. It never has understood men. They cross the plain left hand of the mountain at sunset. The world there smells of ash and the thin glass that ash makes when it melts. Meneldur walks like a man with a weight tied to his waist. The ground hums under his feet. Sometimes he turns his head and looks at something the others cannot see and sneers. Harith gives up her horse when its eyes roll and foam comes from its mouth because it has seen too much that is wrong. She walks next to Meneldur, not touching him, like a woman who is not helping a drunk man home, because that is not what this is. She says once, there will be a door, and he nods once, which is how they know he has not become a thing that cannot hear. The Nazgul do not come close to the cracks in the mountain. Their master's fear holds them by the throat and calls itself courage. In the west, the steward sits and shakes and drops the cup he is holding. In the east, the eye tips as if to see into a hole, and immediately afterward, the ground under everyone's feet thrums like a harp string the size of a river. Orcs throw their heads back and laugh for no reason they could explain if they had words for feelings. They go up by the path of smoke, small shapes against a bigness that does not care. Mithrandir carries a staff that is white with ash that melts as it falls and then looks as though it were never there. Xyrdan goes as if walking on a deck. He does not look down more often than is needed. The prince sweats and thinks about drowning and puts one foot in front of the other because this is that same breath with a different heat in it. The elf moves like a cat over a hot hearth. Harith sets her teeth and keeps her eyes on Meneldur's left shoulder. They are seen. Of course they are. but not everything seen is stopped. On the lip of the fire, with the world booming like a big drum beneath them, there is a moment when the wind pulls hard into the throat of the mountain as if the earth is inhaling. Isildur stands on a black shelf and takes the ring between thumb and forefinger and holds it where the red breath of the world puffs it back. In that second, he is naked to the one who wants him and to all the little wishes that cling to him like burrs. He thinks of his wife. He thinks of a day when he was 10 and he fell out of a fig tree, and everyone laughed because he was crying, and he pretended that he was not. He thinks of a gull. He thinks of a man on a rock who did not know how to say yes or no. The world is so simple here. It is like the inside of the ring. He has never been anywhere clean like this. Isildur, Mithrandir says, and there is no command in his voice, the only witness. Isildur laughs suddenly and softly, looking at his black feet, and tips his hand. The ring falls. It falls without any dignity. It spins like a coin. It flashes one bright, hateful wink. It goes into the flame and is gone. The world pauses. Then it breaks. The mountain screams. The ground rolls. East of the mountains, a tower trembles and comes down in a slow, sickening grace. The hand that has been reaching for centuries feels itself closed on nothing. It howls, and the sound does not go out of the mountain now, but goes down into it. In the marsh, water leaps. In the havens, a wave runs up and kisses Círdan's empty wheelhouse. In the Shire, a farmer stops and leans on his hoe and looks south and does not know why he is crying. Above the Samath Nar, Isildur sways. Hareth, with a courage that looks exactly like stubbornness, steps toward him and puts her hand on his forearm. It is hot. He is burned. He turns his face toward her and looks at her the way you look at someone in noonlight in summer when there is no shadow. "I dropped it," he says, like a man telling his wife that he forgot to bring home bread. He smiles, and it is lovely because it is so foolish. Then he falls, and she does not catch him, and he goes into smoke. Círdan, who has watched whole cities go under and did not cry then because there was no time, cries now. His tears dry on his face. The Prince of Dol Amroth leans over and retches and cannot stop for a long time. The elf sits down very carefully and puts his face in his hands and looks at the little light patterns he sees against his eyelids and understands for the first time why men sleep all night when there is only so much time in the world. Mithrandir leans on his staff and closes his eyes for 1 second and then looks up because there is work. They come down into a world that does not have a shadow over it the same way it did yesterday. It still has many shadows, but one is gone. In Mordor, fires go out in a wind. In Minas Anor, men fall to their knees without knowing they were standing. In Umbar, a man with a jaw that never healed properly wakes and spits blood and feels something in him slip off like a cloak and leave him not cold, but naked. And he goes down to the harbour and lights a small lamp because that is all he can think to do. In the fields of Rohan, the wind changes. Horses stop fidgeting. Men look up and see a sky that looks higher than it did. A boy on a hill in the Westfold, who has never seen the sea and is afraid to leave his mare at night because of wolves, hears a sound in the wind that sounds like laughter and does not know why it makes him brave. In the Shire, the old hobbit who went with the company turns home with steps like a man coming back from a long day at market. He has brought nothing in his hands. His eyes see more clearly. He sits on a stone and watches a hedge for an hour and is happier than most kings have ever been. The corsairs drift like leaves whose tree has been cut. Some of them go home and grow old in a way that surprises them. Some of them go up the Anduin and try to be men of Gondor and find the fields too quiet. Some of them light fire to their own oars in grief because they do not know what else to do with their hands. Zimriel is killed by a boy he tried to draft into a crew who stabs him with a fish knife because the boy's father drowned, and that is a reason sufficient in any age. Saruman retreats. He is not broken. He is deformably bent. He goes up to Orthanc and listens to rain and tells himself long stories about the ways in which what has happened is not final. It is not final because no ending ever is while men breathe. But it is done in a way that the endings he would prefer never are. He will make other mischief. It will hurt people. It will not unmake this. Círdan goes back to the sea. He stands on the place where he stood when the first wave broke on the new shore and breathes salt and tears. He feels thinner, lighter, as if a weight he has carried most of his life and mastered has been cut from his belt. He does not feel young. He does not feel old. He feels like wood that has been planned and is ready to take a ship bent. He orders a hull laid down that will never sail. He calls it quiet, and men who do not understand why he would do such a thing set the ribs anyway, because their hands are calmed by work. Mithrandir goes on walking into places that need someone who will sit by a hearth and listen to a story that is terrible and say, yes, I have heard something like that before, and yes, there is a way through. He keeps out of the Shire more than he might otherwise have done, because the memory of a ring will not leave at once, even now that there is nothing left of it but the harm it has done, and the good it has been bent around. The Prince of Dol Amroth learns to sleep with the window open again. Sometimes he dreams of men falling into water and catch his own breath like a fish, and sometimes he dreams of stone that moves as if it were a sail. Hareth goes back to Linhir. She runs her hand along the river like always. She marries no one. When children run past her door, she throws them a crust if she has one, and kicks them lightly in the seat if they are mud to the waist. She stands sometimes in sun with her hands up by her ears and looks at the sky and remembers heat. When she is old, she will lay down on a day that smells like oranges and not get up again. On that day, the river will be very low, and the stones will show. Men will notice and say, how strange, there is a shape like the bottom of a boat, and never think to call it an omen. The world transformed by this act is subtler than a song. The elven rings feel their end, as they always would upon the unmaking of the one. Their power wanes. Lothlorien does not die, but its gold light grows thinner. Year by year, the edges of leaves are sharper in frost. Voices echo further, because there are fewer to echo back. Rivendell becomes more itself, and less of everywhere at once. The havens begin to be a place not for building, but for watching, and then for leaving. Do the elves go sooner? Some do. There is a ship that goes out one winter in a calm that looks like sleep. The last sound many who stand on the quay hear from it is laughter. It is a good sound. It is not sorrow that the world becomes more a place for men. It is simply time. But time has a taste of ash in it when you have breathed with trees for an age. Gondor grows into its age differently. It does not live with the same long ache. It will have wars, because men do. It will have bad kings and worse stewards, and a few who are so good that their goodness makes everyone around them angry, because they cannot live up to it. It will look west from its white walls, and see not the sea as a mouth that can swallow a ring, but the sea as the road to something that is not theirs to go to, and be content with that in a way that would have astonished their forefathers. Rohan rides long and fast under skies that do not have a red stain in them anymore, and the horses blow and roll their eyes and then stoop their heads for oats. Their songs are still sad, they always were, but they are not sad about fire. The Shire does not know what it almost lost. That is the definition of the Shire. That is why many who love the world hope that it never does know. They will harvest and dance and bury and marry and cry when it rains too long, and laugh when it rains after a drought. Maybe, one winter, an old hobbit will light his pipe with a coal and look south and feel his chest ache with something that is not smoke, and say very softly, as if to a friend, "Well then." And the sea. The sea turns over every day like a sleeper who has learned to accept that he will wake up and it will be morning. Wrecks rot, bones go soft and slip into sand, pearls accrete on bits of grit and becomes something a man will give a poem to a woman for. It gives up pieces all the time. A shoe and a piece of rope, the curved metal arm of a lantern, a plank with a nail in it. It does not give up everything. It never does. There is mercy in that, and cruelty, as in all wild things that we insist on making into gods because we cannot imagine anything that does not have our faces. Is it a pity that Meneldur fell? He did not think so at the end. Is it a pity that Marachil leaped? He did not have time to think at all. Is it pity if the sea carried a thing out of reach until hands could be found that would cast it away? Or was that our story projected onto indifferent water, the story that keeps us from admitting that some things we only survive by accident? In the winter after the mountain burned, a gull flew from the havens east and east again and came to the lake nation of the north. There men saw it and said, "How can such a bird be here?" It circled once and went away. In a marsh near the old road, a child found a ring that was brass and thought she had found a treasure and wore it for a week and then forgot about it. Champions fall asleep beside fires. Fish rise faintly in the blue at dawn. The wind smells like iron and lemon. Life is like this. Not neat, not the exact shape of the hole it fills. Harith's grandchildren stand in a boat with their jaws set and cast nets that their mother's mother taught them to mend in a particular way that leaves a loop at the end of the third line down. Sometimes they bring up a broken oar. Once they bring up a skull. They give it to the priest because that is work. When they dream of heat and of water and of something bright that is not a star falling. Relief lives in the first spring after. It is a taste, not a fact. Men laugh only once at a joke and then begin to work because there is always work. The West is quiet. The East is not quiet, but it is not a roar. The council that mattered is held in low rooms with smoke stains on the ceiling, and the greatest of all victories is spoken of least, because to say it wrong would be to hurt the dead. Then the disquiet comes back. It always does. Saruman builds. Sorrow for things lost because someone saved the world too soon rises in the hearts of people who liked wonders. The elves leave, and their leaving makes some men angry who find their own faces reflected too clearly now in the world's water. They invent enemies less great than the enemy and grow them, because we cannot live with our hands still. Still, the sea moves with its long patience. It keeps the shape of the coasts. It draws boys and girls out onto it who do not know about rings and war. Children grow up in Dol Amroth, who dream of a quiet night with the lights of their own harbour reflected under them like a new city. They make a song for the lady who lived and never married, and who would kick them if they were muddy and throw them bread if they were hungry. The song has only 3 notes. That is enough. Círdan stands on the quay and watches a ship slide out with a crew that he will not see again. He could go. He does not. He will wait. He will watch. He will be there when the last one leaves, and when the last net is mended, and when the last story about the sea's cruelty and mercy is told by a man whose hands smell of fish. He closes his eyes and remembers one night of thunder and water and a golden thing turning one last time before it vanished into a belly that was not meant for sons. And he listens to the tide breathe, and it is kinder now. No, not kinder, only quieter. And in that quiet is something like grace that has nothing to do with forgiveness and everything to do with time. At moonrise, the water looks black as iron. A pale strip of night's own light runs east, very straight, toward a horizon where no ship is. No oar cuts it, no hand follows it, and the mark sheds no shadow.